worn leather of the taxi seat felt cold against my palms as the city lights blurred into streaks of color. Every pulse of the engine felt like a hammer blow against my chest. Desperate and confused, that was the new normal, a heavy cloak I couldn't shake off. I was on my way to the airport, a place of departures, which was darkly fitting because my life, as I knew it, was about to depart for good. My name is Cora Jennings. I'm a 27-year-old postgraduate student living in the frantic heart of Boston, Massachusetts. I've always been the quiet one, the one with her nose in a book, chasing dreams of a stable future in academia. A few years ago, I made the colossal mistake of falling for Professor Elias Thorne, a charming, silver-tongued man who taught my modern literature class. What began as innocent academic admiration twisted into a secret, intoxicating romance that devoured my focus and eventually my soul. I'm an idealist, a hopeless romantic, and now a heartbroken fool. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. What I didn't know then was the size of his lie. I didn't know he had a perfect, picturesque life in the suburbs. When I finally uncovered his marriage, the emotional investment was too deep. I was already drowning. He spun tales of a dead-end, loveless marriage, promising a future with me, a future I clung to like a shipwrecked sailor to a piece of driftwood. 2 years of promises, 2 years of hope, and now 2 years of bitter reality. He never left his wife, and I, idiotically, never left him. Now, I carry a secret more profound than his affair. I'm pregnant, and today, I learned his wife is pregnant too, and he's fleeing the country with her. The taxi screeched to a halt, but the ringing in my ears was louder than the tires. I didn't get out right away. I pulled out my phone, reading the last frantic text from my sister, Willow. She's my rock, my only confidant, and the single mother who sacrificed everything, including her own career goals, to make sure I finish school. Willow, who is 32 and runs a small, bustling bakery in a little town in Vermont, has been paying my tuition and letting me stay in her tiny, overpriced studio apartment in Boston. She knows the whole miserable saga, and her contempt for Elias is a tangible thing. She warned me, she pleaded with me. She saw the lie for what it was, a cheap, tailored suit of deceit. She's raised her son, Finn, with a fierce independence she always hoped I'd inherit. She's seen the dark side of bad choices, and she's terrified of me making the same mistakes. I looked down at my slightly rounded stomach, rubbing the simple silver ring I always wear, a gift from Willow, not Elias. The weight of her disappointment and my own mounting fear was crushing. She had told me, "Don't go, Cora. He's not worth the scene, not worth the tears." But I had to see his face, one last time, to shatter the last remnants of the man I thought I loved and replace him with the truth, the coward. The knowledge of his escape, his final betrayal, had ignited a cold, reckless fire in my gut. I finally stumbled out of the cab, the cool evening air of Logan Airport offering no comfort. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I knew his flight was scheduled to leave soon. A wave of nausea hit me, and I leaned against a cold marble pillar, pulling a cheap, crimson scarf tighter around my neck. The irony wasn't lost on me. This man was leaving the country with his lawfully wedded wife, Lydia, and their child, ready to start a new life teaching abroad, while I was left here, invisible, carrying his secret. The betrayal felt like a physical wound. It wasn't just that he was leaving. It was that he was leaving everything he ever told me, every promise, every whispered dream, behind like discarded trash. I imagined him now, checking in, smiling the charming smile that had once melted my defenses, holding Lydia's hand. Was he excited? Relieved? Did he spare a single fleeting thought for the woman he was abandoning? I felt a terrifying mix of fury and overwhelming grief. I didn't want him back, not the liar, but I needed justice. I needed him to acknowledge the profound, destructive mess he'd made of my life. My mind raced, forming a reckless, half-baked plan. I had to find them before they disappeared into the labyrinth of international travel. I pushed through the crowds, the faces a blur of travelers and tourists. I knew which airline and which flight. It wasn't hard to find the check-in area. His name, his face, seemed to be imprinted on my frantic mind's eye. And there he was, Elias. He was wearing a smart tweed blazer, looking every bit the sophisticated academic, talking intently to a young airline representative. And next to him, Lydia. She looked serene, beautiful in a simple, expensive way, her hand resting protectively over her own, slightly larger, baby bump. The sight of them, so completely whole and united, sent a shard of ice through my heart. They looked like a magazine advertisement for a perfect family. My breath hitched. This was my moment. This was where I either backed down and let him vanish, or I forced him to look at the consequences of his lies. The quiet, bookish Cora was gone, replaced by a vengeful ghost. I strode towards them, every muscle tensed, the curiosity of the surrounding travelers starting to focus on the drama unfolding. I needed to see the mask crack. I needed to see fear in his eyes. As I drew nearer, Lydia laughed, a clear, ringing sound that felt like a slap. Elias turned slightly, and his eyes, those intense, hazel eyes I'd spent 2 years staring into, met mine. The blood drained from his face instantly. The charming, confident professor was gone, replaced by a man frozen in pure, unadulterated terror. The shock on his face was intensely satisfying. A small victory in a world of losses. He looked at me, then frantically back at Lydia, who was busy adjusting the small gold chain around her neck. He took a hesitant step toward me, his lips barely moving. "Cora," he managed, his voice a low, strangled whisper. I didn't speak. I just held his gaze, letting the intensity of my silent accusation burn into him. The surrounding noise of the airport receded, leaving only the deafening silence of our shared, terrible secret. Suspense coiled in the air, thick and heavy. A woman nearby stopped talking on her phone, openly watching. The fear in Elias's eyes told me everything. He hadn't planned to tell me. He was going to vanish and let me find out when the lease on my apartment expired, or when my calls went unanswered forever. I took a deep breath, preparing to drop the first devastating bomb. "You look surprised, Elias," I said, my voice steady, dangerously low. "Were you hoping to slip away without a goodbye?" He tried to usher me away, his hand gripping my arm with surprising strength. "Not here, Cora. We'll talk later. Just go, please." His desperation only fueled my resolve. I pulled my arm away, meeting his glance with cold fury. "Later? There is no later, Elias. You're getting on a plane to London and starting a new life." "And what about the life you promised me? The one you helped me create?" He glanced nervously at Lydia, whose attention was now piqued. She turned slowly, giving me a curious, then slightly annoyed look. Elias's control was visibly fracturing. He ran a hand through his hair, his professional composure completely gone. "You promised you wouldn't do this," he hissed, referencing one of the numerous empty promises he'd forced me to make over the years. But he didn't understand. This wasn't about the affair anymore. This was about the consequences, the life growing inside me. This was about revenge for the years of deceit. I saw the airline clerk watching, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Do what, honey?" Lydia asked, walking over to stand beside Elias, placing a possessive hand on his arm. She gave me a polite, if chilly, smile. "Is there a problem, dear? We're running a little late." Her presence was like a physical barrier, reinforcing their unbreakable bond. Elias looked like a man about to faint. This was the moment of maximum tension. I looked straight at Lydia, ignoring Elias completely. She was wearing a beautiful sapphire pendant that looked like a family heirloom. I saw a hint of the woman Elias had described as cold and unemotional, but I saw no coldness, only quiet pride and anticipation. "The problem, Lydia," I said, my voice gaining strength, "is that your husband is a consummate liar. He didn't just forget a baggage tag. He forgot about me. Lydia's polite smile wavered, her brow furrowed, and she removed her hand from Elias's arm. "I don't understand," she said, her voice dropping. Elias finally lost it. He lunged toward me, trying to cover my mouth, but I evaded him. I took 2 quick steps back, my hand flying to my stomach in a deliberate, protective gesture that I knew would convey everything. I looked directly at Lydia, my eyes brimming with a desperate, painful honesty. "You don't understand because he lied to you too," I whispered, though it carried clearly in the suddenly quiet terminal. "For 2 years, he told me he was leaving you. He told you he was working late, I suppose. And now," I paused, letting the silence hang heavy. "Now he's leaving behind a whole other life, my life, and his child." I pressed my lips together, fighting the rush of tears. Lydia went utterly still. The color drained from her face, making the slight puffiness of her own pregnancy suddenly stark and visible. She looked down at my hand resting over my stomach, then back up at my face, her eyes searching for a lie. When she found none, the initial confusion morphed into deep, wounded betrayal. Elias stood motionless, his head bowed, the fight gone out of him. He was exposed, his empire of lies crumbling around his ankles. The silence was broken by Lydia's sharp, involuntary gasp. She didn't look at Elias, she just stared at me, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "A child?" she choked out, her voice tight with disbelief and rising emotion. "You're pregnant?" I nodded once, unable to speak, the weight of the confession already suffocating me. Elias finally moved, stepping between us. "Lydia, please. It's not what you think. She's lying. She's delusional." His voice was frantic, full of a desperate final attempt at control. He reached for Lydia, but she flinched away from his touch as if burned. The sight of her profound rejection of him was a bitter balm to my wounded spirit. "Don't touch me," she said, the words cutting through the air like glass. She turned to the check-in counter and grabbed the boarding passes from the desk, her hands shaking so violently the paper fluttered. This was no longer just my problem. This was their catastrophe, finally dragged into the blinding public light of the terminal. I felt a fleeting pang of guilt for her pain, which was swiftly overridden by the raw, brutal need for him to feel the same devastation he had inflicted. Lydia stared at the boarding passes, then crumpled them slowly in her fist, her eyes now burning with a quiet, terrifying rage. She was calculating, processing the years of lies. She looked at Elias, a man she thought she knew, and saw a stranger, a fraud. "You told me you loved me," she said, her voice low and steady, a tone far more chilling than a shout. "You told me you were committed. We're having a child, Elias. We're moving our entire life for this new opportunity in London." He tried to grasp her arm, but she recoiled. "I did, Lydie. I do love you. This was a mistake, a temporary lapse." He was a broken record of excuses. I scoffed, a short, sharp sound that drew her eyes back to me. "A 2-year lapse that resulted in this," I said, gesturing to my own stomach. "Don't let him minimize it. This wasn't a mistake. It was betrayal. A calculated risk he lost." The word betrayal hung in the air, a bell tolling for their marriage. The airline representative was now discreetly trying to call security. The crowd around us had swelled, feeding on the high tension of the marital implosion. Lydia finally turned her back on Elias, focusing entirely on me. Her look was complex: anger, pity, and a shared sense of feminine devastation. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice weary, defeated. The question caught me off guard. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I didn't want him back, and I didn't want her life. I wanted him to lose his escape route. "I want him to own up to his responsibilities," I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. "I want him to look me in the eye and stop running like a coward. I want him to know that he can't just disappear and leave me to manage this alone." I pointed to the crumpled boarding passes in her hand. "The trip is off, Elias," I stated, making it a command. You're staying here. You're facing what you've done. You're going to pay for my tuition, my medical bills, and support his child. The word his sounded like a curse. I didn't care about the money. It was the symbolic act of revenge and accountability that mattered. Elias paled further. The fantasy of his perfect escape to Europe had just been incinerated by his two biggest secrets meeting head-on. Lydia slowly unfolded one of the crushed boarding passes, smoothing it out with shaking hands. She looked at the destination, London. Then she looked at Elias, who stood silent, defeated and exposed. She didn't rage or weep. She simply deflated, the energy leaving her body. The realization of the profound love betrayal was complete. You never told me about her, she whispered to him, her voice barely audible. Not once, not a hint. Elias could only shake his head weakly. My heart ached for her, despite everything. She was an innocent party in his web of lies, her life and future equally shattered. The shared emotion in the air, the devastation of two women linked by one man's deceit, created a strange, painful bond between us. I was no longer an aggressor in her eyes, but another victim. A sudden, unexpected feeling of curiosity about her life, her history with him, washed over me. What other lies had he told? I knew he had a daughter from a previous relationship, a detail he had tried to withhold from me. How many other secrets were there? Suddenly, Elias found his voice, a desperate final attempt to salvage his old life. He ignored me completely and focused his entire attention on Lydia. Liddy, my darling, please, don't let this woman ruin everything, he pleaded, taking a hesitant step towards her. She's unstable. She's been harassing me for months. This is a crazy, desperate stunt. We can still make the flight. We can still go. I can fix this, away from here. He was still lying, still manipulating, trying to paint me as the villain. The audacity of his deceit was breathtaking. Lydia looked at him with an expression of pure, cold disgust. She held up the boarding pass, letting it drop to the floor, a definitive, echoing sound. Fix it? You can't fix 2 years of lies, Elias. You can't fix the fact that you risked our entire future, our financial security, our family, for a cheap thrill, she said, her voice hard. And you certainly can't fix the fact that you've managed to put 2 pregnant women in the same room on the same day. This isn't a mistake, it's a personality flaw. Strong. I'm not going. A burly airport security guard, a man in a crisp blue uniform, finally approached our escalating drama. Is there a problem here, folks? I need you to disperse, or I'll have to ask you to leave the terminal. Elias saw a lifeline. Officer, thank heavens, this woman is harassing us. She's been stalking me. She's claiming things that aren't true. He pointed at me, his eyes wide with feigned distress. The guard looked between the 3 of us. The pregnant wife, the frantic husband, and me, the other pregnant woman. My face stained with tears and anger. Lydia stepped forward, her hand rising to stop the guard. No, officer, she said, her voice ringing with unexpected authority. There's no need for security. My husband is simply having a domestic disagreement with his other family. She gave the word other a poisonous emphasis. He's not harassing anyone. He's just realizing the sheer scale of the betrayal he has committed. She looked at Elias one last time, a look of finality. The guard, sensing the highly personal and emotional nature of the scene, lowered his hand, his initial curiosity turning to professional awkwardness. Just as the tension was about to snap, I heard a familiar, sharp voice cutting through the crowd. Cora! My sister, Willow, rushed toward me, her face pale, her eyes blazing with protective fury. She must have tracked my phone or followed the cab driver. She was wearing her denim apron over a simple dress. She hadn't even had time to change after leaving her bakery. She took one look at Elias's defeated posture and Lydia's shattered expression, and she instantly understood. She didn't hesitate. She walked right up to Elias and didn't speak. She just slapped him hard across the face. The sharp crack echoed through the terminal. That, she spat, her voice shaking. is for the last 2 years of lies. And this, she said, raising her hand again, is for the life you tried to run away from. The second slap landed with even more force. Elias reeled back, clutching his cheek, speechless. Willow put her arm around my shoulder, pulling me close. You think you can just abandon my sister, Elias? You think this ends here? No, this is just the beginning of your nightmare. We're going to hold you accountable for every penny, every lie. This was the fierce revenge I hadn't had the strength to carry out myself. Lydia watched the scene with a strange, detached expression. She didn't look shocked by the physical confrontation. She looked almost satisfied. My sister Willow turned to face Lydia. For a moment, I feared another argument, but Willow's expression softened slightly. I'm Willow, she said quietly, Cora's sister. I'm so sorry, truly, for the pain he's put you through too. Lydia nodded, her voice rough. I'm Lydia, and I'm sorry for her. He's a monster. This moment, this unexpected truce between the two women he had so deeply betrayed, was the true climax. It was a solidarity born of shared emotion and a common enemy. Lydia reached down and picked up her suitcase, her eyes firmly avoiding Elias. I'm getting a car, she announced. I'm going home. He can figure out his own way back. She looked at me, a flicker of something almost like pity in her eyes. I hope you find peace, Cora, and don't let him leave the country. He owes you more than a postcard. With a swift, decisive finality, Lydia walked away, pulling her suitcase behind her. The airline representative, who had been witnessing the entire family drama, quickly checked the computer, a look of professional regret on her face. Mr. Thorne, she announced, your flight is officially closed. You are a no-show. Elias stared at the gate, then at the empty spot where his wife had stood, his face a mask of utter defeat. The realization that he had lost everything, his marriage, his new job, his escape, hit him like a physical blow. He turned to me and Willow, his hands trembling. You're happy now? You've destroyed my life, he managed, the resentment burning in his eyes. Willow stepped between us, her gaze lethal. You destroyed your own life, Elias. We just provided the mirror. Now you're going to face your responsibilities. I looked at him, not with love or even tension anymore, but with a cold, clear finality. The old, hopeless romantic Cora was gone. I had my answer. I had my justice. I was free. Willow gently guided me away from the chaos, her arm a firm anchor around my waist. We didn't look back at Elias Thorne, who stood alone amidst the bustling terminal, a man marooned on the shore of his own wreckage. As we walked toward the exit, the noise of the airport seemed to fade back to a tolerable murmur. My initial impulse to create a scene had evolved into something far more profound, a forced reckoning that exposed the liar and gave me the closure I desperately needed. Are you okay, honey? Willow asked, her voice softer now. I took a deep, shaky breath, touching my stomach. I will be, I said, a fragile but genuine smile finally reaching my eyes. He's staying. We're safe. The feeling of overwhelming relief mixed with the bittersweet recognition of the past 2 years being a complete illusion. The journey home to Boston felt different. It wasn't a retreat, but a return to a life I could finally start building for myself and my child. One brick at a time, free from the shadow of Elias's betrayal. The story of Love Gone Sour was over, and the story of Cora Jennings was about to begin. Click on the next story waiting for you on screen. Because trust me, the betrayals only get darker from here.